causes this as well. And that causes them to save less. So interruption in careers is a big one that we see. I know we personally went through it in our household when my in-laws aged, and my wife was called upon to kind of care for them and take care of their affairs. And we had teens at the time, and she actually put her business on hold. So we experienced this as well. And the other thing is by nature, women being caregivers and nurturers are a little bit more conservative in their investing. They're just conservative in nature, majority. I'm not looking to classify, but I'm just saying majority. However, that changes once we see that they engage and embrace investing. They're still more conservative than men, but they're not as conservative as they normally would be without understanding how to invest. We talked about longevity. Women will outlive men 5 to 8 years is what we're seeing, and experienced it through our client base as well. So what does that mean? Well, you need more money. When we work with clients and we talk to them about the last survivor, we're usually talking about the wife or the spouse, the woman in the family, and how will retirement dollars stretch to cover them for those extra 5 to 8 years. Most likely, long-term care will be needed. We see more and more of this where they take care of their spouses, and then they're left and needing someone to take care of them. So long-term care is a big piece of planning when we look at it. And married women are most likely to make financial decisions on their own because they live longer. So there's going to be a period of time that the spouse, she will be a widow. And if she's not used to handling finances, that burden now is on her to do that. And that's why we try to encourage and help from a holistic standpoint, having the family, the husband, the wife, both understand their financial positions, so when that time comes, it's not a shock. In the workplace, women tend to earn 82%. Now, this was a study done about 2 years ago. That translates to about 82 cents on a dollar. So women make 82 cents for every dollar their male counterpart makes. But again, that decrease, we're seeing a head-to-head salary base, that gap is closing. What drives that decline more, as I mentioned, is because women are most likely to put their careers on hold or drop out of the workplace to be caregivers. This impacts a lot of different areas that people don't realize. Social Security being a big one, because Social Security looks at the 35 years of the highest earnings. And if there's a gap in your earnings, that's going to affect it. It also affects a lot of benefits from the employer. A lot of employers will offer, one-time salary as life insurance. So if you earn less, that number's lower. And into pension calculations, if you're so fortunate to still have a pension where you are. Women also face a lot of obstacles. I think job loss is probably uniquely across the board, but more divorce, single parenting, or loss of a spouse. So these are some of the big factors that we see and we've experienced even with our own client base in this space. As I mentioned, caregiving is a big component of a woman's life. It affects the income, as I mentioned, the lower Social Security, and the vulnerability for job loss and divorce, as well as difficult. And once you enter back into the workforce, there's a bit of a challenge there as well that we see. So when we talk about conservative investing, this is traditionally, as I mentioned, once women engage, they actually become better investors than men. There were several studies done that on average, on a year-by-year basis, women investors average about 1% almost, about 0.94% higher returns than a male investor. And that's because of their being a little bit more conservative, but the uniqueness is what we find is where men are much more aggressive, they're looking for, they're looking for growth in the market, they're looking for that next home run. Women investors are more income focused. They seem, when we work with women, it's more of how do we generate income out of our investments. And the income is a big piece that helps balances the investment strategy and actually outperforms. So there was a study done by a group of almost 2,500 folks, of which 450 of them were women. And when they were all set to do their own investments and see what the outcome was, and the women actually outperformed men by about 1.2%. So they're very shrewd investors. But again, traditionally women are more conservative, and because of that, of course, if there's no risk, there's no reward. But there's a much better calculation of risk that women will take to reap those rewards versus traditional men would. Now, there's no one size that fits all. Everybody's life is different. Everybody in the workforce is different. Whether you're single, you're married, you're widowed, you're a business owner, you're the breadwinner, somewhere along your life, you're going to face one of these challenges. And that's where investing becomes a great part of your financial security, is how we look at it. So when we look at these components, there are 6 different areas that we look at. And for those that has had the opportunity to either sit with myself or my partner David, you'll see some of this that we go through in taking control of your money, becoming more knowledgeable as an investor, advocating for yourself in the workplace. Women are more outspoken on a lot of things, but for some reason in the workplace they may or may not be, and that is shifting as well. So, and planning for retirement, and protecting your income and your assets. We look at all these things when we sit and we do a one-on-one if we happen to be on site, or even if you call in. So this might be familiar to some of you folks. So the first is taking control of your money. This is the first step. Realizing your financial well-being. Basically, it's just going through and figuring out what your expenses are versus your income. And the first area we look at is know your cash flow. What does that mean? How much discretionary cash do you have? and that's simply what is your income every month net that you have coming in minus your fixed expenses, the mortgage, the rent, the light bill, the auto insurance, the car payment, all those fixed expenses. When you minus that from your net income that comes in a month, whatever's left, we consider cash flow. That cash flow is used for groceries, fuel, however you spend money. But that's what you can control, because the fixed, most likely, you can't, right? So it's all about the cash flow. We're looking for positive cash flow, of course. And budgeting is a big piece of it, and how you manage it. Usually when I do workshops, it's getting better these days. When I ask folks how many folks actually have a budget and work through a budget, about almost 40% of the folks will raise their hand. So more and more people are being more conscious, and if it's a mixed audience, usually the women will outpace men then have a budget. So that's good news. Creating an emergency fund is essential. Some folks look at it and say, well, why do I need all that cash? It's not doing anything for me. Even though cash is really not generating much income, it's the security that you need in case something happens. So you can sleep at night and kind of know that you have cash available when needed. And establishing credit. This is getting more and more important for women. And I think in today's world, it's becoming more prevalent. In the past, what we've seen is the women in the family didn't have much credit. And when something happens, whether they get divorced or widowed, they find that they're having a hard time doing anything because of credit. But in today's world, that's shifting as well. And setting clear goals. I'll tell you, women are much better at doing this. And not only are they better at doing it, once you do have it set, women are much better at staying on track with the goals. Where men seem to be, we'll set a goal, we'll go after it, and then we'll flip-flop or we'll change midway. And that could disrupt a lot of the financial strategies that are put in place. Become more knowledgeable as an investor. In today's world, there's so much information out there. That's the good news. So anything you want to know, anything you have a question about, you can Google it. The bad news is there's so much information out there, and not all is, I want to say, great or good. So it depends on how you look at it. It brings me back to what I've always said is, you don't know what you don't know. So you have to go out there and seek. But I think what's more important is for you to know what you don't know. And that's basically, if you're not sure, don't make it up. Don't go look up one piece of information and go with it. Seek out the knowledge. And there's a lot of help, especially with a program like this, the Participant Effect. There's a lot of help out there that can help you learn. So what does it take to become a knowledgeable investor? Well, if you're just starting out, you start with the basics, right? Take small steps, learn as you go, set some goals, and work with someone that can help guide you. Probably the worst thing we see is people procrastinating, putting things on hold because of family or whatnot, or just not getting started because you don't know how to start. Ask the questions and start slowly. For those that are more experienced in investing and has done well, you must be doing something right, and then it becomes is how do you continue that? Making sure that what you're investing in is in line with what you're trying to do. Risk tolerance is a big one. Because women are more conservative, the risk tolerance is a lot lower. So, as we said before, there's no risk, there's no reward. So we have to tailor that and kind of work through that to understand it. And the more you understand, I don't want to say the more risk you'll take, but you'll take more calculated risk to achieve your goals. Understand what you own. That's the biggest thing. We meet a lot of folks, they bring in their portfolios because they work with someone or they did it themselves. And actually, it's not a bad portfolio, especially the ones that do it themselves. And it's like, well, do you know why did you do what you did? And the answer usually is, I don't know. This sounded good. I looked it up. It looks good. Understand what you're doing and why you're doing it is a big key. And consider taxes and fees as you invest. And the other big component as we work through investing is inflation. Being too conservative and not being able to keep up with inflation is probably your biggest detriment. So we have to make sure at least we're pacing inflation. Now, I know it's been low the last couple of years, but it did go on a rise last year, and it seems to be puttering out again. But if we get back to norm is about 4.5% inflation. So how do we pace that? And you have to make adjustments as you go. Unfortunately, this is not, Betty Crocker said it and forget it. You really need to not spend a lot of time, but keep an eye on what you're doing and how your investments are going. And you also have to take into account what's going on in the world around you, the marketplace. Not that you make radical changes, but understand what is causing issues around the market, which will affect your money. As I mentioned, to be more knowledgeable, admit your mistakes and move on. We all fall into this. I don't think this is gender specific. We make a mistake and we dwell on it. That's number one. It's not healthy mentally, which will cause physical issues. But at the same time, in investing, it's extremely disruptive. So sometimes if you hear the term, it's better to cut your losses and move on. In investing, that's very true. So risk averse, be risk averse in the right way. So if we're looking to generate income, the risk profile goes down quite a bit. And know your numbers and passwords. So this is where maybe you're not 100% involved in your financial family household, but you need to be more aware of the different accounts that are out there in your household, how to access those, and if you do a lot of online, how do you access it? What are the passwords? What are the logins? Because again, we go back to, women live longer and outlast men. A lot of times we find that women are left with not knowing this information, and then we struggle to try to help put the pieces together. So, advocate for yourself in the workplace. This is probably getting much better than it used to be. And why? Because starting salaries make a big difference. The more money you make, the more you can save, the more you can invest. As I mentioned, it affects a lot of benefits, Social Security and other benefits that your organization offers you. If you don't know whether you're being compensated fairly, there's a lot of places out there you can look. Glassdoor is one of them. It's pretty good at looking at similar type positions and taking a nationwide look at what the mean is, if you will, of what a position's salary is. So that's one way to look. The other thing is to be an advocate for yourself. Speak up when there's accomplishments that are obtained, and don't be shy about looking to take on more challenges as well. Big thing today in the workplace, work-life balance. There's a lot of, or there used to be some hesitation around asking for or seeking help around workplace flexibility. I'll tell you today, in a lot of organizations and even in ours, we share a lot of flexibility with folks that are good employees to be able to work flex hours, work from home a couple days a week because of family and things of that nature. So telecommuting, flex time, part-time, these are things that are very prevalent in the workplace today. And it's no longer, well, I need to quit to go take care of my family. It's more of, so what can we do for me to keep doing what I'm doing and take care of my family and be able to have that flex time. The next portion gets into numbers. Do we want to pause for a minute and see if there's any questions around?
Sure, Saul. I actually do have a question from the chat from earlier in the presentation. Mm-hmm. Someone would like to know, if they retire from their job at 60, will the 2 years that I don't work, will this affect her Social Security when she starts receiving it at 62? Okay.
So I was just going to say, so the thought probably is you want to collect at 62. Depending on your earnings, 2 years will not make that much of a difference, because what they look at is 35 years of your highest earnings. So if you leave the workplace and you've worked all your life, if you're high earning right now, it'll affect it a little bit. And when I say a little bit, you're talking maybe a couple dollars a month, not a whole heck of a lot. The answer would be, if it's the last 2 years and you're looking to collect at 62, it's not going to affect it all that much. What's going to affect collecting at 62 more is that you're taking it early. You're going to take if your full retirement age is 66, you're going to take a 25% reduction based on your full retirement age benefits. If your full retirement age is 67, you're going to take a 30% reduction to take it at 62. So that's going to be more of a reducer than the last 2 years of working. Anything else out there?
Okay, there was an addition to that. She says that she makes $70,000 and has been working since she was 13 years old.
Yeah. So the last 2 years, those zeros will fall to the bottom. If you have that long of a work history, it's going to affect it very, very little. Like I said, what's going to affect you more is that you're taking it early.
Okay, before we restart, if anybody has any questions, just let me know in the chat, and I'll unmute you. I did mute everybody per the background noise. So if you do have a question and would like to speak, I can unmute you, or you can write the question in there and I can read it aloud anonymously. It looks like we do have another question. Mm-hmm. How much should you save for an emergency fund?
Good question. So it differs for everyone, but here's kind of how we look at it. There's two ways. For emergency fund, you look at your fixed expenses. And what I mean by that is Again, your mortgage or your rent, your auto insurance, your cell phone bills, your electric bill, your water bill, everything you need that's a fixed expense monthly to keep the lights on and keep yourself going. We look at it as either 3 times your fixed expenses in emergency fund. If you're married with a household and you have kids and you own a home, that raises about 4 to 5 times your fixed expenses. That's just the generality that we look at. So whatever your fixed expenses is, it's either 3 to 5 times, depending on your household. Some folks wanted to take it a step further, and they'll figure out what their monthly total expense is. Fixed expenses plus groceries, because you still have to eat, right? So groceries, gas, if you have kids expenses, and they'll say, okay, my total monthly expense average is X, and they look to emergency cash about 3 to 4% of that, because that number is much higher as emergency. And for some folks, it could be a lot. I mean, if you're running if you're running $4,000 a month to $5,000 a month in total household expense, you're talking close to $15,000, $20,000 in cash reserves. Having said that, make sure those cash reserves are sitting in a high-yield savings, not in your normal, bank or credit union. And when I say that high-yield savings, that cash should be sitting in a high-yield savings earning at least 2% or more. Today, there are savings accounts, fully liquid saving accounts, paying about 2.2 to 2.4% for liquid savings. And that's where you should park the money.
Okay, there's a second part to that question, Saul. She's asking, would you count credit card payments as a fixed expense? Payments can often vary month to month, so how would that work?
Well, credit card, yes. When we look at fixed expenses, if you carry a large balances and if you're paying off credit, yes, because you don't want your credit to be hurt. So we would include that as fixed expenses. If you use a credit card for daily expenses, meaning you use it for gas, groceries, eating out, and you pay it off every month, well, then that becomes part of your discretionary spend or part of your fixed expenses. So you would count that in. And I hope that helps.
Yeah, and also, do you have any recommendations for the liquid savings provider?
Yeah, so I know a lot of folks are probably sitting there going, 2%, where are you getting that? I'm getting like hardly anything in the bank. So these are online banks. I personally use Ally, A-L-L-Y, Ally Bank. Ally Bank pays 2.2% on savings. There's no minimums. There's no fees. Discover Bank. Discover has a bank as well. Pays about 2.1, I think. And there's a third one out there. I'll be surprised if anybody has heard of it, but I've met a few. It's called Marcus, M-A-R-C-U-S, Marcus Bank. Marcus Bank is the online banking division of Goldman Sachs, and it's paying about 2.3, I think. It was as high as 2.5, but it's come down a little bit. So those are 3 good areas. Now, these are fully accredited chartered banks. The reason they can give you a higher interest rate is they don't have a brick and mortar. They don't have tellers. They don't have electric bills. They don't have a building to maintain. They are online banks, and they're able to pass that to their customers in higher interest rates. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I'm even writing down some stuff here. Okay, and one more before we get started.
Yep.
Do you have any other recommendations besides Glassdoor to find your average salary?
Glassdoor, Indeed, is pretty good now because Indeed, they're trying to really ramp up their recruiting for employers to seek employees. So they have a piece out there as well that you could look at. That's about the best that I know of to look out there. And, if you Google salaries, there are a few websites that will do national averages, and then you have to be a little careful because if you're nationally averaging a New York position versus a position even here in Florida, there'll be a big disparity. So depending on what part of the country you're in, make sure that you try to look at similar in your area to get the right mean, if you will. Okay?
Okay, great. I think we can get started again.
Okay.
Good questions, everybody.
Good. So we're going to get into some Social Security stuff as well. So that question was good, and hopefully some examples will help clarify that. But as we talk about retirement planning, as you see on the slide here, there's no surprise here, right? The sooner you start, the better. So as you've probably been staring at for the last couple of minutes is, based on savings at what age or stage of your life that you're in, you can see there's a big difference here on an average 6% return of how much you save. So if you're in your 20s, by all means, start saving. And when we're talking, when we're talking $2,000 a year, it's very little out of your pay that you put away, 150 or something, $160 a month. But if you can do that, you can see the saving potential, and if you can increase it as you go, it'll make a big difference. One way to do this, of course, is within your 401k or 457 or whatever sponsored plan that you have at work to start contributing into those plans. So we talked about this, save as much as you can. If you're offered a match, by all means, whatever you can do, put in the percentage you can to get as much of the match as you can. That's free money, so let's not miss out on that. And then a lot of folks say, well, I'm contributing the max, and the max is their match, say 4%, 5%, 6% match, and they said, yep, I'm maxing out. You can contribute above the match, and we encourage you to do so. The match is great. It's free money, but at the same time, you need to continue building. One way we advocate to do that is every year increase your 401 contributions by at least 1% a year. And some of you may say, well, I automatically do that already. Every year they increase me by 1 or 2% automatically. That automatic increase will go to a certain point, and then it will stop. And if you've hit that point and it's stopped, you can manually go in there and continue to increase until you max out. And when I say max out, it's not a percentage, it's a dollar figure. So if you're younger than 50, right now the most you can contribute into a company-sponsored plan, a 401k of such, a 457, 403b, is $19,000 a year. So whatever percentage of your salary equals that, that's what's the max you can contribute. If you're 50 or older, you can contribute an additional $6,000. So that'll bring your total to $25,000. Also consider IRA. So if you don't have a company-sponsored plan, you can have an IRA on the outside on your own and put money away as well. if you have a spouse that is not working or that does not have a 401k or a retirement savings where they are, they can start one as well. And if they're not working, you can do a spousal contribution for them as well. Now, the IRAs, the limit's a lot lower. If you're younger than 50, it's $6,000. If you're over 50, you can add an extra $1,000. It's $7,000. So, Social Security. Social Security, the way we look at it as it's we've paid into it our whole lives. So it is a guarantee from the government that they will give us a stream of income for the rest of our lives. We do a whole series around Social Security. We have a whole workshop around it. A lot of questions come up is it going to be around? I'll share with you my personal thoughts is if you're 50 or older, and I'm 58, so if you're 50 or older, I believe Social Security will be there the way we know it today, meaning 62 is the youngest you can collect, 66, 67 is your full retirement age. So everyone's saying, okay, well, I'm younger than 50. What then? I believe it'll still be there for you. I just don't know what it'll be. Don't know if my feeling is the age range is going to go up. So what that means is, if your full retirement age is 66 or 67, that may go up. If you're 50 or younger, that age bracket may shift to maybe 68 or 69. And if you think about it, if we're living longer and working longer, it would make more sense to shift the age band in today's world. So when we look at Social Security, it provides a big chunk of retirement benefits, or it really does help in retirement income. The flip side of that is health care. So you have Medicare as well when you retire, when you reach 65. So that's an expense that will come in, and Social Security will help fund a lot of the health care. So we really got to think about how do we support our own living outside of that. Social Security does provide for disability and survivor benefits. So there's a lot of different components of Social Security for divorcees and for widows. And for each one of those scenarios, there are differences. So for a lot of women that have been out of the workplace, raising a family for many, many, many years, and had now back in the workplace, and as I mentioned, the Social Security benefits of their own suffered, and they're wondering what can we do. Well, you are eligible for up to 50% of your spouse's benefits. So if you were a stay-at-home mom, and now you're back in the workplace and you're worried about Social Security, and you look at your benefits and say, oh, my benefits is only $1,000. But your spouse's benefits might be $2,500 or $3,000. Well, you're eligible for up to 50% of your spouse's. That also goes for if you're divorced and you've been married for at least 10 years and you're not married. You can actually collect against your ex-spouse's benefits. It doesn't affect him or her. Well, in this case, it doesn't affect him at all. And you would be able to get that extra bump as well. And for widows as well. So if you were married for more than 10 years, and your ex passes, you're still eligible for spousal benefits based on your ex. So there's a lot of areas around Social Security that needs to be understood, especially for women. Benefits is based on numbers. As I mentioned, it's 35 years in the workforce. So the best thing to do is, if you haven't yet, is go to SSA.gov and get your Social Security statement and see where you are. Those forms, those forms with the green lines or whatnot, you probably haven't seen them for a while. They've stopped about 15 years ago mailing them out. I think the only time you get it now is when you turn 60 and maybe 65, and then your full retirement age. But you can always go online to SSA.gov and look at that. As I mentioned to the question that came up before, if you're looking to take it early, you're going to get either a 25 or 30% reduction. So if your full retirement age is 66, you'll take a 25% reduction. If your full retirement age is 67, it's a 30% reduction. Now, each year you wait, you get back some of that reduction. So if for the person that asked that question is going to collect at 62, my question would be is a couple things. One is health. If health is good, or I should say it this way, if health is poor and that's why you're leaving the workforce, then by all means take it. But if your health is good, and then the question becomes is, do you need it? Do you really need it? If you need it, you need it. Take it. If you don't, try to wait one more year, because from 62 to 63, you'll gain back close to 5 to 6%. That's the biggest increase to getting back to 100%. As you get closer to your full retirement age, the reduction becomes less and less and less, if that makes sense. And then if you can wait above your full retirement age, for every year you wait up to age 70, you get a guaranteed 8% increase. So here's a slide that kind of shows it. So let's just take, if you're going to, if your full retirement age is 66 and you decide to take it at 62, you can see the 25% reduction. And you can see the big difference between 62 and 63. $90, if you will, is a lifetime increase. So, if you think about it, if you're healthy, 63, 62, longevity potentially is 25 to 30 years, right? So if you take that, and I'm just doing some quick math, 90 times 12 times 25 years, that's probably close to another $25,000, $27,000, $30,000 that you're missing out on. So, and you can see that if you can wait, it increases by 8% a year up to age 70. Couple things about retirement. When you retire will make a big difference. If you can retire later or work longer, of course you can save more. You could put more away, and we just saw Social Security benefits are higher. Retirement expenses are reduced because you don't have that much time. You're shortening your retirement years. How we deal with the shortfall. So if you do have what we call retirement income gap, when we sit and look at your income versus expenses and project for retirement, if you fall short, how do we deal with that? Healthcare expenses is a big one in retirement, between Medicare and drug plans and all of that. And the thing that drives all of this is longevity. Good news, bad news, right? With today's medicine and technology, we're living longer. We're healthier today. We try to be healthier. We try to exercise more. And this is just overall population. So that's driving a lot of the longevity. That's the good news. The bad news is we're living longer. So that means we need more money. We have longer time in retirement. and that drives a lot of it. How you take distribution in retirement is a big deal as well. So for those that have, pre-taxed 401s or IRAs versus Roths and investment accounts that are non-retirement investment accounts, cash savings, how do you draw? What's the best way to draw money through retirement? What are your options? Unfortunately, if you're widowed or, something happens and you find yourself, left with your spouse's 401k, your spouse's IRA, and you're figuring what's the best way to draw, you need to really work with someone and say, okay, what's the best strategy to start tapping these accounts in retirement? And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about protection. So in your working years, raising a family, as I mentioned, more and more women are in the workplace that are breadwinners. The question is what happens if something happens to you? What's going to happen to your family? How do you care for them? So life insurance is a big piece of it. Probably more so is disability. Studies have shown that in a person's lifetime, you're 87% more likely to be disabled than dying. And what I mean disabled is something happens where you are unable to return to what you are doing today, which means you would command less salary. How do you make up for that? So disability insurance is very important. And of course, without saying, home and auto insurance, health insurance, and today long-term care, looking at how eventually we're all going to get there, but how do we take care of ourselves without the detriment of the last survivor or the family? And then, of course, you look at trusts, and if you're a business owner, how do you handle your business entities to maximize protection around your assets? That kind of moves into estate planning. We also have a whole workshop around estates and trusts. Sometimes this notion will be a little daunting when people hear estates. Let me simplify this a little. An estate plan, a lot of people hear that word and they say, oh, that's for people with money. Nope. I bring it to the level of this is, an estate or a trust is all about what to do with your stuff if something was to happen to you. And we all have stuff, whether it's our house, our 401ks, our bank accounts, our investment accounts, our cars. We all have stuff. So what do we do with this? And who's going to help take care of this financially if something was to happen to you? As I mentioned, dying is one thing, but probably being incapacitated is more devastating. Because if you're incapacitated, you're unable to make those decisions. So when we look at estate planning, we help step through a couple things. Incapacity is probably more important than death. The way I look at it is you have to have a living will. What do you want done if you're incapacitated? If you're brain dead, do you want to be kept on a ventilator? Do you have a DNR, do not resuscitate order? If you die, how do you want to be taken care of? Healthcare proxy. Who's going to make medical decisions for you? For those that have gone for a medical procedure, an operation, and they'll ask you, do you have a living will? If you say no, they pull out a clipboard and they say, okay, who's going to make a decision if you become, unconscious? And they check all the boxes and you sign. So make these decisions ahead of time. Power of attorney. Who's going to handle your financial affairs if you become incapacitated? Especially for single parents. Who's going to take care of your bills? Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to pay for the kids? Very important if you're a single parent. And then, of course, you go into a living trust and how that can help if you're incapacitated. And then on the death side of it, you have to have a will. Everyone needs to have a will. What to do with your stuff, how to handle your children if you have kids, and what you want happen to what you have. Too often we hear people die and without a will, and what happens is the state steps in and takes over. Very prominent folks recently, everybody's heard about Prince. He died, didn't leave a will. I think his estate is still being probated, and that's been several years now. I believe last year, Aretha Franklin died, did not leave a will. They've spent millions already just probating her estate. Recently I heard something, they found a notebook or something written under her couch cushion that kind of she was outlaying a will, and they're trying to see if they can get that now to be authenticated as a will. So it's very important, otherwise everything gets put on hold. A testamentary trust is basically a trust. You can use a trust to kind of help distribute your assets the way you wish. Big note on a will and a trust. A will is public information. You have to go to probate, you file the will, and it becomes public information. Anybody can go to your local courthouse, your probate, and say, hey, so-and-so died. Can I take a look at their probate? And in probate, you have to list all the assets that person has. In a trust, there's no probate court oversight. Everything is done in private. As I mentioned, if you don't have a will, you become intestate laws, which means you go to the state. Now, there are some things that you may not need a will for, things that you own jointly. So if you own the house with a spouse and you have right to survivorship, that'll pass to the survivor. If you have joint bank accounts, the survivor can access it and will have that. So there are certainly certain joint-owned properties and accounts that if it's jointly owned, it falls outside of the will or trust. So this is emergency funds, right? Let's try to prepare as much as we can for what we don't know, the unexpected. Job loss, unplanned pregnancies, divorce, illness. I think we touched on a lot of this already. Caring for aging parents. We in our generation is more prone to what we call the sandwich generation, meaning you may be working, juggling a career, juggling a family with kids, and now you have to care for aging parents. And you're sandwiched in the middle between your aging parents and your kids and household, and you're in the middle trying to figure out how to make it all work. Loss of a spouse, we talked about that. So really, at the end of the day, getting a handle on your finances is really about you. It's about your financial security, financial clarity, and financial flexibility on how you live your life and your goals and your dreams. So I think with that, that's it, and I think we're right on time. Well, actually, one minute over. But Kelly, you want to see if there's any questions or anything? I know we ran a minute over, but if there's still people on the call or have questions, I'd be glad to entertain them.
Sure. I do actually have a couple questions. Mm-hmm. One of them is everyone's retirement age 67, or can it vary?
No. So good question. If you were born 1954 or before, your full retirement age is 66. If you were born between 1954 and 1960, every year you add 2 months. So, for example, if you were born in 1957, your retirement age is 66 and 4 months. Once you hit 1960 or on, your retirement age is 67. So it's either 66, it's between 66 and 67, and it all depends on where you fall within the range. Does that help?
Absolutely. And then also another question is there a difference between a will and a living will?
Okay, good question. So a will, as I mentioned, so the difference is when you pass, a will is, as I mentioned, public record, and you have to go to probate, okay? A living will, a living trust, is a will, well, it's similar to a will when you're alive, but everything that is in that living trust, when you pass, becomes a closed trust. So what that means is once you pass, that trust is not open to the public at all. You just have to, whoever your executor is or your trustee is, will go to the probate court, advise them that you passed, and that you have a living will, and that living will now is a closed trust, a living trust, and now that's a closed trust, and the courts will not be involved whatsoever. So while you're alive, the biggest thing in a living trust is you can make changes. You could put things in the trust, take it out of the trust. You can make changes within the trust. But once you pass, that trust now is closed. And however that trust is set up, that and whatever you put in there as how to distribute your assets, that will now take place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have some more questions. I know we're over, so if you do need to drop, absolutely, if you'd like to reach out to me at wellness@theparticipanteffect.com, I can set you up with a meeting with Saul or your financial advisor. Saul, if you are okay with it, I'm going to keep asking
sure.
more questions. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew they could reach out and set up appointments if you have something specific to discuss. We're absolutely here for you. So just give us a call or email us. So let's see. Okay, so one question is, can I move money from my 457 to my Roth IRA now while I'm working? And if so, what is the cap amount?
Okay. Okay. A little bit of a complicated question. Couple things you need to check is, number one, a 457 is actually a salary is a compensation deferral plan. Just make sure that you don't have any rules within there where it will allow you to do what they call an in-service withdrawal, which means while you're still working and you're in service contributing, that you're allowed to move money out. Okay? Number one. Number two is, if you are not in a 457 Roth component, and your money currently is being pre-taxed into the 457, when you pull money out to put it into a Roth, you're going to have to pay taxes on that, because a Roth is after-tax money. So depending on how much you want to put into your Roth, you're going to have to pay taxes on the money before it goes into your Roth. Yes, you can do that. You can move it if they allow you to. But just beware, you're going to have to pay. That's actually called a conversion. So there is no limits on conversion because the exposure is taxes. So if you're, let's just say you're in the 22% tax bracket, you move $10,000 into your Roth, you're going to be exposed to about $2,200 worth of taxes for that $10,000 to move into your Roth.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so next question If you are divorced and eligible for spousal Social Security, how can you find out what the amount will be if you do not have contact with your ex?
You don't want to call
That's a good one.
No, I'm only kidding. Whoever asked that question, you can, as long as you know his date of birth and Social Security number, you can call Social Security and just say, "Hey, I was married for 10 years or more. I'm now divorced, and I'm trying to see if my spousal benefits, my ex-spousal benefits, will be better for me than my own." And they will be able to look it up and let you know.
Well, that's a lot easier than I'm sure they anticipated.
Yeah. And it doesn't affect them either. They will never know that you called. And if the benefits are better, and they say, "Oh yeah, it's an extra $200 a month for you," he will never know. So it doesn't affect him in any way when he goes to collect. Yeah.
Awesome. That's even better. Okay, it looks like we have one last question, and it was seemed to be a lot of interest in the estate planning thing. So, someone just wanted to know if there was a fee involved with estate planning. Like if you were going to plan your estate, would I have to pay a fee for it?
Yeah. So it all ranges about how complex your estate is, right? I mean, if you're not a business owner, you don't have a lot of assets, meaning you have a home, 401k, and investments and stuff like that, you might be able to just get away with a will, okay? And to do a will, if you seek out an attorney, probably run you, and I'm using numbers around here in Florida, so depending on what part of the country you're in, probably run you $500 to $700 for an attorney to help. Now, that most likely will help you do a couple things. Put a living will in place, put a power of attorney in place, and put a will in place. If you're looking to do a trust probably will run you a little over $1,000, depending on complexity again. If it's a simple trust, probably $1,000 to $1,200, depending on what part of the country you're in. Could be a little more, could be a little less. If you're more complex, you have a lot of assets, you have a lot of different things you want to do in the trust, give this one money, don't give that one money, give this one money for 5 years, and then do this. If it's more complex, it's going to drive up the cost of that trust. So.
Okay. I actually do have 2 more questions. Let's see. How would shifting to part-time work after 62 impact my Social Security?
Good one. So I guess there's a couple of ways to look at that question. Is if you shift to part-time and you want to collect Social Security before your full retirement age, whether it's 66 or 67, you are going to run into what they call an income test, okay? And what that means is if you're still working and collecting and below your full retirement age, today the most you can make is $17,400, right around there. If you make more than that, for every $2 you make over that limit, you're going to give $1 back of Social Security. Okay? So if you plan on working at 62, 63, 64, 65, and you're going to make more than, I think the number's around $35,000 a year, 30 some odd thousand a year, it probably doesn't even make sense to collect because number one, you're going to get a reduction. So if your full retirement benefits is $1,000 at 66 or 67, you're going to collect at 62. Potentially that reduction is going to be $750, and then if you make more than $17,400, you're going to start giving it back. So you're going to make very little. So it all depends. We meet a lot of folks that live in communities that lends themselves to seasonal work, if you will. or they find an employer that's willing to hire them just to make up to the limit, and then they stop working for that year. So it doesn't reduce their Social Security. You can do that as well. Little complex answer to that question. Oh, by the way, once you reach your full retirement age, 66 or 67, and you decide to collect Social Security, you can make as much money as you want, and there's no reduction.
Awesome. So I'm not sure if we can answer this last question in the we're already about 15 minutes over, but I'm going to see what you think, Saul, and I can possibly email everybody the answer if it's too long-winded. So it says, could you please briefly touch upon the different types of trusts and their uses? IPS. Okay.
I'll try to condense it really quick, okay? Again, let me preface this real quick. We are not attorneys, so what I share with you is from what we've experienced and what we know of working with attorneys helping clients. So you have, of course, the living trust. We talked about that already. Basically you would use a trust because, number one, you want privacy. You don't want the public to know what you have. And secondly is for distribution. If you don't have a trust, the probate court is going to oversee the distribution of your assets. What does that mean? You leave a house, you leave a car, you leave bank accounts. The executor has to account to the courts on how they distribute it based on your will. Did you give that car to Mary per the will? Yes or no? You have to have an affidavit, sign it, prove it to the courts, so on and so on. With a trust, however you spelled out in the trust for distribution of your assets, your trustee is responsible for it. There is no court intervention. The courts don't even know about it. Really quick, if you folks remember, that chef, the famous chef that died, I think his name was Bourdain or something, Bourdain. When he died, they said he was broke. He had a home worth $200,000, $300,000, $100,000 in the bank. He had $400,000 the most. He was broke. And they wondered how a celebrity chef of his magnitude could be broke. A couple of weeks came out and said, oh, yeah, he had a trust. He had a blind trust for his daughter. So we have no idea what he left to his daughter in that trust. So the way they knew he had a house and a couple $100,000 was because it's public record. When they found out he had a trust later, no one knows what's in that trust. So you have a living trust while you're alive. You could put things in and out. The other is called an irrevocable trust. Once you do an irrevocable trust, it's exactly what it is. It's irrevocable. You cannot make changes to that trust, meaning if you put something in the trust, you cannot take it out anymore. It's in the trust. And please, don't be fearful of trusts. As long as you're alive, you control everything in that trust. You control how it's used, how it's spent. If you have a house in the trust, you can still live in the house. If you want to sell the house and buy another house to live in, you can do that in the trust, in the irrevocable trust. As long as you're alive, you control it and you use it. That's the short version of it, the difference between the trusts.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Saul. And thank you for this presentation. Again, if anybody else is left on the line, you can email me at wellness@theparticipanteffect.com if you'd like to set up some time to discuss something specific or any thoughts you have on your financial well-being. Saul, is wonderful, and thank you so much for the presentation today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful day, and email me with any questions that you might have, or to set up a one-on-one meeting with Saul. All right. Thank you. Everybody have a good day. Bye-bye.